Hello everybody, welcome to one more session in AWS series. In this particular session, we will basically do hands-on exercises for VPC, subnets and other related network services that we have discussed in the previous session. Now, first of all, let me draw and show you what is that services that we are going to create and how they're going to work with each other. Let me shift to my whiteboard. We are going to create first of all, we're going to something called as a VPC that we all know. Inside a VPC, we will create a subnet. Okay, let's name this as sub1. And we will, by default, when I create a VPC, there will be no internet gateway attached to that. So let us create an internet gateway and attach the internet gateway to the VPC. Now, even before we create an internet gateway, let's create one EC2 instance in this particular subnet and try to connect to this subnet. Oh, sorry. Try to connect to this particular EC2 instance. And we will see whether we are able to connect or not. So by default, we will not be able to connect because there is no internet connectivity to this subnet. And then we will connect a internet gateway to the VPC and then let's try to connect to this EC2 instance. Then we will see we are able to connect. Okay. And then we will create another subnet. Okay. And we will keep this subnet private. Okay. This subnet we will make it as public. How to make it public? We have to create something called as a route table and assign the route table to the subnet. Okay. In this we have to add a internet gateway rule. Now how to make this particular subnet private? Okay. So basically here also we have to create a route table, but in this route table we will add a NAT gateway rule. And where we have to create a NAT gateway? NAT gateway has to be created in a public subnet. So we will create a NAT gateway in a public subnet. So this subnet is public. We'll create a NAT gateway here. And this NAT gateway we will add in this route table. So this particular subnet will be private. And then what we will do, once we create these connections, we will create a EC2 instance in here. And we will try to connect from this EC2 instance to this EC2 instance with the help of private IP address. Okay, we'll do a RDP with private IP address. This is the first hands-on exercise that we're going to do. And then we will create a bastion host. And then we will do a VPC peering. And then we will do VPC endpoints. These are the four hands-on exercises. First, let us finish this and then we will look into the next hands-on exercise. Let me shift to my AWS console. Now I am on my AWS console. So first thing we need to create a VPC. To create a VPC, you see there's an option called as VPC here. Let me go in there. Okay. Then you see there's something called as VPC here. I can go here, as well as we can select this option called as create a VPC. Let me click on this. Now AWS, with the help of this screen, right? I mean, with the help of this console, we can actually create VPC and the subnets also at the same time. You see, we can create VPC, subnets, route tables, network connections, everything at one go. Okay, but let us create them separately and see later. And it is very easy to create all of them together. So what I'll do, I will only create a VPC and name the VPC. The name of the VPC I will give it as class. and I need to define a CIDR range as we have discussed. The CIDR range I would give would be 10.0.0.0 slash 16. Okay, that is the CIDR range, and the rest all we can leave it as defaults. Select option create VPC. Now, if you see, the VPC is created, and what is the status? The status is enabled. And what is the IPv4 CIDR range? That is 14.0.0.0 slash 16. This is what we have mentioned here. Okay. Now, if you see here, CIDR, okay, this is the CIDR range. All right. We have not given any flags as of now. Okay. Now, let's say we need to create a subnet in this particular VPC. Now, let me go to subnets, select option called as create a subnet. Now, when we are choosing this option to create a subnet, the first step is that we need to mention this particular subnet should be part of which VPC. The VPC that I have created is called as class. Select this option class. Okay, and then we need to name the VPC. I will name this VPC as my public, this subnet as my public sub, because I will make this subnet as a public subnet. Availability zone, if you have some preference, we can choose the preference, or else you can leave it default, then it will choose the preference by itself. But we need to mention a CIDR block for this. Let's say I'm going to give the CIDR block as 10.0.1.0 slash 24. Okay, let's see what happens. Okay, and then select create subnet. You see, this is saying that CIDR address is not within the CIDR address from VPC. That means we have to select the CIDR range which will be under this CIDR range of VPC. Okay, now let me choose that. Let's say I'm going to give it as 14.0.1.0 slash 24. That is the CIDR range I will give for this particular subnet. Now let me select this option called as create a subnet. Okay, now my subnet is created. So till now what we have done, we have created a VPC and we have created a subnet. Now you see, next let me create an internet gateway, okay, and attach the internet gateway to our VPC. Now select this option called as internet gateway. Select option create internet gateway. I'll give the internet gateway name as my class internet gateway. Alright, select this option called as create internet gateway. Now if you see, the state of this internet gateway is detached. That means this is not assigned to any VPC. If we have to assign this internet gateway to a VPC, go to this options called as actions, select attach to a VPC. Here we can select the VPC that we created, which is called as class, and attach internet gateway. All right. Now we created a VPC, we created subnets, we created internet gateways. Now let us go to EC2 instance. Let's go to EC2 instance here. Create a EC2 instance in the VPC that we have created. Select option launch instance. I'll give it as my VPC demo EC2. All right. And I will choose a Windows operating system on this. Key pair. Let me create a new key pair. I'll give it as my key pair and select option create key pair. Now let us open HTTP and HTTPS ports, rest all We can leave it as it is and then select launch instance. Now the instance is getting launched in the VPC that we have created. Now if we see, the instance is up and running. Now if we go into this, we can see under network, okay, we only have private IP address. If you see, there's no public IP address here, okay. And if you see what is the VPC, you see the VPC is the class that we have created, okay. Now you see there is no public IP address, right? Let us do one thing. Let us create one elastic IP address, okay, and assign this elastic IP to this particular virtual machine. Now what is an elastic IP? Elastic IP is a public IP address which is static. That means if I restart a virtual machine, the elastic IP will not change, okay. But if you restart a normal EC2 instance with a public IP address that you have, right, the public IP address will change. But if I don't want to change, I can use something called as elastic IP address. And we have to make sure this EC2 instance should be in the same region where we are creating this elastic IP address. Okay. Now let's select option called as allocate. You see there is one elastic IP address that is created. Now allocate this elastic IP address. Go to actions. So now you see there's an option called as associate elastic IP address. Now I want to associate that to my instance. Okay, you see this my VPC demo EC2 is the instance that I want to associate that with. And select option associate. Alright, now if we go back to the instances, this is the instance. Now we can see under networking, you see the public IP address is the elastic IP address. Okay. Now let me try to connect to this server. Let's go to RDP. Go to remote desktop. Connect. Okay, let us generate this password. Select option connect. RDP client. Get password. Private key file name. Select option open. Right, and decrypt password. Okay, we have the password. But if you see this, we are not able to connect to this instance. Why? Because we have created an internet gateway and given it to the VPC, but we have not added the internet gateway to the subnet. How can I add an internet gateway to the subnet? I'll show you that. If you go here, let's go to subnets. What is the subnet we have created? My public subnet. Now if I go into this my public subnet, you see there is something called as a route table which is assigned to this particular subnet. And what is the rule that is there? 14.0.0.16. There is no rule that it is saying that it has to access internet gateway so that it will have an internet connection. Now what shall we do? Let us create a new route table and add the route table to our subnet. Select this option called as create a route table. I'll give the name as my route public and which VPC it has to associate with. This is the VPC that I have created. And select option create a route table. Okay, now this route table is created. In this still there is only one rule. Now I have to add internet gateway to this route table. Select this option called as edit routes. There's an option called as add route. Okay, inside this I'm saying that any device from the public can connect. through what? Through a internet gateway. Now you see it is displaying the internet gateway that we have created. Select the option, select save changes. Now we have created a route table and we have added a rule in a route table that this route table can connect to public with this internet gateway. Now to which subnet we have to associate with this? Let us select this subnet associations, edit subnet associations. So you see there's a subnet by name my public subnet. Let me select this and save associations. Okay. Now let's go back to subnets. You see this is my public sub. Inside this, let's go to route table now. Now you see there is a new route table that is added which has two routes in it. Okay. Now let us try to connect to this particular server. Let's go to RDP. What is the server IP address? This is the server public IP address. Connect to this, select option connect. Now if you see, immediately I got this option to connect. Now what is the username? Username is administrator. Username is administrator and the password is password. Okay, now I copied the password, select option OK. Now I am able to connect to this remote desktop. Okay, we see that we are able to connect to this remote desktop. Now let me summarize the steps that I have performed for this particular hands-on exercise. Okay, I'll name it as VPC hands-on. Right, step 1, created a VPC. Step 2, created a internet gateway. Step 3, created a subnet. Step 4, created a route table. Step 5, added a rule, or you can say added a route to the route table. Step 6, associated a route table to the subnet. Okay, in this, what route we have added? We have added internet gateway route. Okay, next associated a route table to the subnet and then created a EC2 instance in the VPC that we created. Okay, now we can connect the EC2 instance and check. This is what we have done till here. Here what I have used the elastic IP address as the public IP address. You can also use normal IP address also, that is fine. Okay, now what is the next hands-on that we are going to do? We are going to create another subnet, but I'm not going to make it as a public. Okay, first of all let me create that and I'll explain. Let me go back to my console, go to VPC, let's go to subnets. Let's go to subnets here, select option create subnet, and this subnet should be part of the VPC called as class. Okay, I'll name this subnet as my private sub because I'm not going to make it public. And what should be the CIDR range? I'll give the CIDR range as 14.0.2.0/20. 24. Okay, there is no conflict. I can create this particular subnet with this CIDR range. See, now I'm creating this subnet. You see, subnet is my private subnet. Now, let me select this subnet. Let me go to the route table. Do we have any routes? Only there is one single route in this. Okay, let me go to subnets again. Okay, you see my private subnet is there, my public subnet is there. Now, what I want to do, I want to make this subnet private, but it should have a limited internet access. That means I want only outgoing internet access. I don't want any incoming internet access. How can we do that? We can establish that by using something called as NAT Gateway. Select this option called as NAT Gateway. Go to create a NAT Gateway and give a name to my NAT gateway. My demo NAT. Now this NAT gateway should be part of which subnet? This should be part of public subnet, because this NAT gateway will filter the internet access to the public private subnet. So I have to create this NAT gateway in a public subnet, not in a private subnet. Okay. So I created this NAT gateway in a public subnet. Now we should allocate a elastic IP address to a NAT gateway. Simply select option called as allocate elastic IP. This is allocated, and then select this created NAT gateway. Okay. Now I'm able to create a NAT gateway here. All right. Now let's go to the subnets. Go to my private subnet. So even before we go to subnets, let us create a route table for the second subnet. Go to the route table. Select option called as create a route table. I will give the route table name as my private route table. Okay. And this should be part of which VPC? This should be part of this VPC called as class. Select option create route table. Now if I go into routes, there is only one route here. Select option add routes. Add a route. Anybody can access. Through how? By using a not internet gateway this time, by using a NAT gateway. Now you see that it is showing the NAT gateway that we have created. Select option save changes. Okay, now you see this NAT gateway has two rules here. Let me associate this route table to the second subnet, that is a private subnet. Go to subnet associations, add subnet, edit subnet associations, select this private sub and save associations. Okay, now let's go to subnets. Go to my private subnet. If you go into route table, you will have a route table which has the rules, NAT gateway and local internal communication route. Okay, now let's go to EC2 instance and let us create a EC2 instance in the second subnet. Go to EC2 instances, select option launch instance. I'll name it as my web server. Okay, I will choose the AMI as Windows. I will choose the key pair as the same key pair that we used before and edit the network settings. Select the VPC as class and the subnet as my private sub. Okay, you see here there's an option auto assign public IP. It is disabled. Actually, we not require a public IP for this, but still I will enable it. Okay, and the security group, I will choose a default security group. let me create a new one. Select security group. All right. And let me leave everything else default and select option called as launch instance. Now this is creating in a VPC which has a which is now this EC2 instance is creating a in a VPC and in a subnet which is a private subnet, which is not a public subnet. So let us go ahead and see whether I'm able to connect to this particular server or not. Okay, it is creating my VPC demo 2. No, this is the one. My web server is the server. It is initializing here. See, this got a public IP address. Let me go to RDP. Copy the public IP address. Select option connect. We will see we will not be able to connect to this particular instance. Why? Because the subnet does not have any internet connectivity. So we will not be able to connect to this server. Then how can I connect to this? Now let's say we have already connected to this server, right? So this server is there in the same VPC. Let's say I want to connect to this. I want to RDP to the second server from this. Okay, let me log into this. Let me open RDP here. Let me open RDP here. Open remote desktop connection. So this one I am connecting inside a server, okay, which is there in a same VPC. Now what is the IP address? Now I cannot connect with public IP address. If you have to connect with public IP address, you need an internet connection. So I will connect through a private IP address. Okay, let me connect through a private IP address. Select option connect. Okay, now let me generate the password for this again. Let's come here, select option connect. Get password. Use a private key. Open. Select option decrypt password. Okay, the password is generated. Let me copy the username first. Give the username and copy the password here. Okay, select option OK. Now if we see, I'm able to connect to this server. Why? Because both the servers are there in a same VPC and we have given an outgoing access to the server with the help of NAT Gateway. That is how we are able to connect to this. Okay, let me show you my diagram and explain you guys what we have done till now. Even before that, let us make a note of the steps. Okay, after this, created a second subnet, created a subnet, created a NAT gateway, and then created a route table, added a route called as NAT route, created a EC2 instance in the second subnet, and then connected to second EC2 instance from the first one. All right, this is what we have established. Now let me show you guys my image and explain this one more time. Now, if you see here, this is what we have established. We created a VPC and then we created a subnet. We created an internet gateway assigned to the VPC. We created a route table and added an internet gateway rule to this route table. We have launched the EC2 instance and then connected to the EC2 instance. Next, we created a subnet 2. Okay. And this subnet, we have added a route table and a NAT gateway rule to the route table. And where did we create this NAT gateway? NAT gateway we created in a public sub and launched an EC2 instance. We connected to this EC2 instance from this server. We RDP'd from this server. We RDP'd into the EC2 instance. So we are able to connect to that. If we try to connect to this from public, we will not be able to do that because it does not have any public access. So by default, is a subnet public or private? By default, it is private until unless you go ahead and edit the route tables, add a route called as internet gateway to the route table. It will be a private sub. All right. Now let us look into the next hands-on exercise, which is called as VPC peering. Now, what is a VPC peering? Now, let's say we have one VPC here and another VPC here. It could be in the same region, it could be different regions, or it could be in a different AWS account. It does not matter. Now, let's say in this VPC, we have one EC2 instance. In this VPC, we have one EC2 instance. By default, there will not be any communication between these VPCs, or this we cannot establish communication between these EC2 instances. But if at all there's a requirement that we have to establish communication between resources which are there in VPC to the resources which are there in this VPC, then we have to create something called as VPC peering. Okay, if we create this VPC peering, then we will be able to establish communication between these two resources. Okay, that is what we are going to do now. Let me shift to my AWS console. Now we already have one VPC. Let me go to VPCs here. Okay, you see we have a VPC called as class. Now let me create another VPC. Select this option. Let me create a VPC. The VPC now we will choose this VPC and more. Okay. Let us give the name as project. That's okay. And let me give the CIDR range as 17.0.0.16. Okay, you see this will basically create 4 subnets. 2 subnets are public, 2 subnets are private. Okay, and it is going to create route tables automatically. Previously we have created manually route tables. Now it is going to create automatically. It is going to create a internet gateway as well. All right. Oh God. Select option create VPC. Let's say VPC and more. I will change the CIDR range. Okay, rest all I will leave it as defaults and select option called as create a VPC. You see all this, it is creating subnets, internet gateways. It is creating everything with just one click. Okay, we can go to option called as view VPC. Okay, now this VPC is created. The VPC name is project. If I go here and refresh this, I have VPC by name project VPC and the VPC by name class. Now I want to establish communication between this VPC project and class. Let me go to this class VPC first. and then let me go to, okay, not there. If you see on the left, there's an option called as peering connections. Let's go here. Now it is asking us to create a peering. Select this option called as create peering connection. Okay, I'll give the name as my new peer for demo. Now, what is the source VPC and what is the target VPC? We need to enter both them. The source, let me select it as class. Target, let me select it as project VPC. Okay. So you see the CIDR range for the source is 14.0.0. For the target is 17.0.0. We have to make sure that there is no issues with the CIDR range as well. Okay. Now, if you want in another region, you can select. If you want the target VPC, if it is there in another account, you can select that another account. All right. And select option create peering connection. Okay. A VPC peering connection has been requested. Go to peering connections now. Now, if you see, go to actions, there's a accept request or reject request. I'm able to see here itself because I have selected the same region. If you select a different region, you need to go to that different region and accept the request. Now I'm selecting the accept request. You see it is saying requester VPC, acceptor VPC. There is no conflict between the CIDR range. So there is no issue. If there's a conflict in the CIDR range, there will be an issue. You see here requester region also same, acceptor region also same. But if you accept a region is different, you need to go to that region and then you will see this request and then you need to accept this. Now you see it is saying that your VPC peering connection has been established. To send and receive traffic across VPC peering now, we need to add a route to the peered VPC in one or more of your VPC route tables. So you see it is also showing us to modify my route tables now. Let me go there. You see it has automatically created a route tables for project VPC, public and projects route table, private one, east one. Now let me go to this route table here. Okay, you see there's an option called as edit routes. Let's go there. Let's select add another route. 17 route. Now let's add a rule called as peering connection here. Okay, it is showing us what is the peering connection, my new peer demo. I have added that. And here now I need to give the CIDR range of the VPC. The CIDR range is this. Okay, the CIDR range. This is the source CIDR range. I need to give the target CIDR range. This is the CIDR range. Now save changes. Similarly, I need to go to the route table of the second VPC. Let me go to the route tables. And this is the route table of the second VPC. Let me go here. I need to edit the route here as well. Edit routes. Add a route. VPC peering. Add a VPC peering. And here I need to give the CIDR range of the first VPC. Okay, this is the CIDR range. Save changes. Okay. Now, with this, the devices in the source VPC will be able to connect to the devices or resources on the target VPC. That means communication is established between both the VPCs. If you see here, destination is local and it is active. All the three routes are active. Okay. That is how we can create VPC peering.